Mr. Sitoh.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the Workers' Party has proposed the following as alternatives to the GST hike: to use more of the net investment returns contribution, or NRIC, for expenditure, i.e. 60% instead of the current 50%, and to put back a smaller amount, 40%, into the reserves; to use a portion of our land sales as operating revenue; raising corporate tax so that the effective tax rate is 15%; raising tax on activities which have negative externalities; and raising sin tax. DPM Wong had earlier this year, in his budget round-up speech, explained why this cannot replace a GST increase. For today, I wish to comment on their NRIC proposal. But, sir, before I do so, I think it is even more important to re-examine why we are having a GST hike. Of course, we all know a GST hike is never politically popular at any point in time, anywhere. But in Singapore, the PAP has always done what we think is in the best interest of Singapore now and for successive generations, sometimes regardless of the political cost. That is why we are where we are today. The first principle in terms of taxes and expenditure is that each generation must, as far as possible, bear the cost of the public services it consumes. There should not be an intergeneration transfer of liabilities such that one generation pays for the services consumed by another generation. It is surely not a pay-as-you-go arrangement that we see in other countries. This is the slippery slope that we mustn't go down, and there are many examples of this elsewhere. Eventually, it pits one generation against another and leads to society fissuring and even fracturing along generation lines. One can see many examples of this around the world. Mr. Speaker, sir, today on the NIRC, we have a 50-50 arrangement which we think is equitable. This current generation takes 50% of the NRIC and leaves 50% for the next generation. If we drop to 40% to reserves, what is there to say we cannot drop to 30% or even 20%? I must say 50-50 is not rocket science, and I'm the first to admit empirically it feels like the right thing to do. We are an Asian society, and generally speaking, our forebears have tried very hard to give us a better life than what they went through. This is possible only because they consume less than what they produce and left us with the rest. We should continue this good practice of leaving something for our descendants. Sir, at this juncture, I'd like to take a pause and comment on some of the speeches that were made earlier. The Honourable Member, Mr. Louis Chua, he likened a GST increase to scoring an own goal when you are 5-0 down in football. When he said that, I am reminded of the Suzuki Cup semi-final last year on Christmas Day, where I was there with Minister Edwin Tong, and where DPM Lawrence Wong also mentioned during his budget speech. In that game on Christmas Day last year, our Lions lost 4-2 against Indonesia. We had 1 man sent off, 2 men sent off, 3 men sent off. We were down to 8 men. Our back was against the wall. But the young Lions battled. They were clearing shots off the line. They defended stoutly, and they were throwing bodies all around. That is how Team Singapore play, not the way that Mr. Chua has spoken about, conceding an own goal or scoring an own goal when you're 5-0 down. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. James Lim also made mention of over-saving for our reserves. For a small country like Singapore, there is no such thing as over-saving. We are not just saving, we are reinvesting. We are then flowing it back to the NRIC of future generations. Just a short while ago, I see a group of students in our audience. They just left. But why do you think, even in such turbulent times, we are able to invest in education, to invest for the future? It is precisely because of the reserves that our forefathers have given us. So let's not kid around. There is no such thing as under-saving or over-saving for a small country like Singapore. We have to save as much as we can, and I dare say, for a small country like ours, do what you can, and don't ever use that word over-saving, please. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will go back to my speech now. If I have time, I'd like to say something about Mr. Leong Man Wai's speech, but let's see. Sir, the argument against the GST hike, as some have said, is that times are hard, we are experiencing terrible headwinds, and people are suffering from the rising cost of living. I recognize that. We all know that. I'm sure the government knows that both in their heart and in their mind. So what is their solution? Here I am reminded of what a doctor friend told me. I learned a new word. The difference between analgesia, I hope I pronounced it correctly, analgesia and pain relief. Analgesia is the absence of pain. For example, an anesthetist is trained to achieve analgesia in a patient undergoing surgery. But when a patient is in this state, he needs constant monitoring, and this consumes a lot of resources. It is not possible to have a long period of pain whereby a patient feels, it is not possible to have a long period of time whereby a patient feels no pain. This is because pain is a sensation, and not to have any sensation is dangerous. While we do not like pain at all, a little pain is necessary because it is what makes us alert, it is what keeps us alive. To have no sensation of pain, unless induced by a doctor through anesthetic interventions for a short while, is not good at all. A good example is a person with badly controlled diabetes. Often he has no sensation in his lower extremities because his nerves have died due to the scourge of diabetes. He feels no pain. Not just pain, he actually also feels nothing at all in the area where the nerves have died. As a result, he may not know he has developed bad diabetic ulcers, which can sadly end up with an amputation of a part of the leg. He may even die from these painless diabetic ulcers. So in summary, only the disease or the deceased feel nothing for a long period of time. It is therefore neither possible nor advisable that the government shields Singaporeans from difficult economic conditions worldwide so that they feel no pain at all. It is also not responsible for the government of this generation to spend more than its fair share so that this generation of Singaporeans feel no pain. The can is kicked down the road, and subsequent generations have to feel additional pain because of the profligacy that takes place now. I know this sounds somewhat harsh, but reality is like that. No one owes Singapore a living. We must be prudent so that we are always resilient, no matter what or how the global climate is. Any good government must understand this. Only then can we bounce back from difficult challenges and grow even stronger in the future. But it is also vital that the government also feels for and understands the pain of Singaporeans during such challenging times. What the PAP aims to do is to reduce the pain, as in providing effective and substantial pain relief. Where the pain is most severe and sharpest, we will give the most pain relief through targeted assistance schemes. But we cannot provide analgesia so that we do not feel at all the adverse conditions around us. That would obtunk us to the point that we may have a festering wound threatening our lives in the long term, and yet we are not aware of it. We may then die from it eventually, or at the very least, we may need drastic intervention, not unlike chopping off a part of our limbs. That would be a disastrous outcome that we need to prevent. We are here to help, yet we do so in a way such that Singaporeans remain alert, sensitive, and even quickened to the challenges and threats around us. That is how Singapore can continue to stay resilient, thrive, and prosper. So the GST hike is implemented to help balance the books. But at a deeper level, the hike reminds us, both the government and the individual, that we need to remain prudent in our consumption behavior and that the world is going through tough economic times. But I must say, this does not stop the government from intervening decisively to help families and individuals to lessen the pain in these trying times. And I think that the government has shown through the years that no matter how challenging the internal or external environment is, we will continue to support Singapore and Singaporeans on the cost of living here. Even with the impending GST hike, the assurance package and the enhanced GSTV scheme effectively buffers many Singaporeans from the increase. So the fundamental difference between how the PAP and the WP approaches this problem is really this. The Workers' Party wants to provide analgesia for an extended period of time. The question is whether we as a country are better off and more resilient if we take this approach. Or are we better off if we take the PAP's approach, which is to keep the country alert to dangers and challenges while we give relief to those that are suffering more as we forge ahead through these difficult waters? Mr. Speaker, I think the answers are clear. Planning for the long-term interests of successive generations of Singaporeans, always ensuring that Singapore remains resilient through choppy waters, while at the same time supporting Singaporeans in facing the challenges of today, is surely a better, more holistic approach than providing analgesia to numb the senses so that we can all pretend that the pain does not exist. Mr. Speaker, since I have a little bit of time, I'd like to comment on what the Honourable Member, Mr. Leong Man Wai, said, and since he used Mandarin, I will try my best to do so. 刚才梁议员提出了一个故事，他讲了这个阿公跟阿贤的故事。当然，他是这个故事的作家，我们不能阻止他怎么写。基本上，梁先生是讲，这个阿公是来自一个很富裕的家庭，但是他一直跟阿贤拿钱，跟阿贤拿钱，拿到阿贤喘不过气。当然，这是他的故事。但是我想送梁先生一句话，我不知道他有没有听过这句话：养儿100岁，长忧99。养儿100岁，长忧99。我们是一个亚洲的社会，就是说我们养孩子、养孙子100年，我们99年都会照顾他，都会担忧他的。所以在这个亚洲社会，在新加坡。有没有这种事？可能有，但是肯定是很少数、很少数、很少数的。所以他讲这个阿公一直要拿这个阿贤的钱，阿贤喘不过气。我觉得可能在我们这个社会是比较少，但是可能还有一句话我刚刚想到，我不知道他有没有听过：千金难买少年穷。千金难买少年穷，就是如果你少年的时候你不是很有钱的话。你长大了，你会珍惜你所拥有的东西，所拥有的资产，你会珍惜你身边的人。所以，他刚才讲那个故事，我有点难以相信。但是可能这个阿公呢是要栽培他的孙子，要为他的孙子储蓄，要为他的孙子准备他以后的教育等等等等。所以刚才我觉得他刚才讲那个故事是否相当的极端 ？Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. 谢谢。